I'm going to have you, Nate, tee us up on all the different scenarios because I know you like playoff scenarios so
Yeah,
much from an
sure.
American sports standpoint. So
I was going to say I felt bad you having to do it a second week running, so that's fine.
I was working through it last week, and now I've seen your ESPN.com report and you've laid it out so beautifully. So please do it for our listeners as well.
Sure. So basically, it's much simpler this weekend than in Singapore. In Singapore, it looked very unlikely. You basically have to think if Max wins the race or if he doesn't win the race this weekend. If he wins with fastest lap, then he's the world champion. Doesn't matter where anyone else finishes. If he wins and doesn't get the fastest lap, Sergio Perez is mathematically still out of the championship. But Charles Leclerc finishing second in that scenario would take the race on to Austin, which I think all of us would, deep down would love to be the outcome, because we were going to be there. It becomes a bit more interesting if he doesn't win the race. So given where the points are at the moment, you've got, So I was just double checking my notes because this is complicated. So he leads Leclerc by 104 points, Perez by 106 points. Because of countback, the fact that neither of those guys, if they won every race in the season, would win more races than him by the end of the year, he'd win a head-to-head tiebreaker against them. So he basically has to leave Japan 112 points clear. So if he doesn't win the race, and those two scenarios I said don't come true, he basically has to outscore Leclerc by a minimum of 8 points and Perez by a minimum of 6 points, which isn't too difficult, when you start looking at the way points are given out. But he can't win the championship if he finishes 7th or lower. So he's got to finish in the top 6. Preferably he's got to win the race. And he's got to finish ahead of both drivers. If one of them finishes ahead of him, it goes to Austin. So I think that was fairly concise, fairly clear. But basically, if you want Max to win the championship this year, you just got to root for him to drive in the manner that Max usually drives this year, which is just incredibly quick and just kind of faster than everyone. And yeah, I can see him doing it. It's hard to imagine him having 2 bad weekends back to back.
And if you want Max to win the championship, you're very, very, very unlikely to be disappointed at the end of the season. So yeah, just hold on.
It will
happen.
It's a good horse to back at this point.
Yeah, it's a frustrating situation in F1, isn't it? Where we kind of all know that Max is going to be champion, but he's not officially champion yet. And then Nate has this kind of bugbear with F1 is that when they become champion, so let's say Max does it by winning and getting fastest lap this weekend, no questions asked, he's definitely champion. He doesn't then get given the trophy. Then he has to wait until this season award ceremony, just in case somebody appeals something, or I don't know, I mean, obviously what this budget cap's going on at the moment, it's unlikely to affect this year's championship, but just in case something pops up, it doesn't get official. But I know this is Nate's arena, really.
It drives me wild, but I've driven Laurence wild with it over the last few years. But like every time Lewis would win the title early, he'd just get the trophy of like the race he'd won. But even there was a few years where Austin and Mexico, he finished outside the top 10. And it's like your new world champion, Lewis Hamilton. He's just kind of strolling around the paddock like, yeah, I'm the champ. But it's like, give the man the trophy, like give him, some of the most iconic images in sport are, I don't know, like, John Elway with the Lombardi trophy, or in England, we always have Bobby Moore on the shoulders of his teammates with the World Cup. Like, you don't want to see 6 months later him in a tuxedo just with like a great trophy, by the way, like a really nice trophy. But I always say to F1 fans, I'm like, try and picture it in your head. It's very difficult to imagine the F1 trophy. Whereas if you say, like, think of the Super Bowl trophy or the Stanley Cup, you immediately think of it. You're like, I know exactly what that looks like. I've always thought that's quite interesting. So, but Laurence is right. If people appeal it, it can change hands late, but it just seems like a sad thing. And I think last year there was a discussion about it between F1 and the FIA, because I think, obviously with American owners of F1 now, they, maybe lean that way as well. But anyway, I didn't even know we were going to rant about that today, so I'm glad Laurence brought that up. And I will be ranting about it if Max wins on Sunday, our next podcast. I'll just repeat this rant when he doesn't get his championship.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.